Well, it's wonderful to be here today, this afternoon, with such a great group of people, scholars and practitioners who've contributed so much to this country, and individuals that I'm lucky enough to call friends. I'll keep my introduction here brief so we can get to the more fun part of our conversation. I'll introduce the speakers, and then I'll give you a little bit of an agenda and a lay of the land going forward. I'm honored to be here this afternoon with General Richard Clarke. General Clarke is the 12th commander of the U.S. Special Operations Command. Prior to assuming his current command, he served as the Director for Strategic Plans and Policy at the Joint Staff on the Pentagon. And it was there when he was serving that I had the privilege of working with him. I was on the White House National Security Council staff at the time. General Clarke has also led soldiers at all levels, airborne, ranger, mechanized, light infantry units, during deployments that have included Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm, and 4 deployments in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Dr. Richard Shultz, who will also be part of our conversation, is a professor of diplomatic history and the director of the International Studies program at the Fletcher School. He has served as a security consultant to various U.S. government agencies, and he has been a pioneer in advancing ideas related to the integration of military operations and intelligence. He's written many books that address various aspects of the changing character of war, and his most recent one is called Transforming U.S. Intelligence for Irregular War, and I do recommend it to you. Most importantly, he's one of the best mentors out there to the next generation of thinkers on this subject. He has been a dear friend and a great mentor to me, and I thank you for that. And last but not least, we have Bryan Clarke, no relation to General Clarke. He's one of my colleagues here at the Hudson Institute. Bryan is the director of the Center for Defense Concepts and Technology. He's a retired submariner. He's done work over the years on analyzing all different parts of all of the operational problems the U.S. military is facing. Right now, he's working on several projects, including those related to 5G, the use of unmanned systems for anti-submarine warfare, and he's doing a study right now for DARPA on the use of AI on autonomous systems for decision-centric warfare. It is this latter idea of decision-centric warfare, which is fundamentally about superior decision-making in wartime, which I'd like him to talk about today because it's relevant to the overall subject of our conversation today, which is AI and machine learning and the integration of these technologies into our military forces. So let's begin today. First, General Clarke and Dick, I'd like you to talk a little bit about your paper, which was written the past year. I've lost all track of time during COVID, so I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure I read it over the past year and it's out there. It's called Big Data at War, Special Operations Forces, Project Maven, and 21st Century Warfare. If you could tell the listeners a little bit about the themes of the paper, we'll then move on to how some of those themes are impacting the problem sets, the challenges and opportunities we face today. Thanks so much.
Hey, Dick, if okay with you, I'll start and then turn over to Dick. Nadia, thanks for the introduction. The genesis behind the paper, was as Dick and I were talking, and Dick really wanted to get a better understanding of how we were applying artificial intelligence and trying to develop this forward. Dick approached me about 9 months ago and said, let's do something together that we can take the historical basis of what was used in Iraq with our task force forward in the beginning days of Iraq with Task Force 714 and the find, fix, finish, exploit, analyze, and disseminate process that had been developed and worked through, which was really a great historical example. But let's talk about it today with Project Maven and some of the lessons learned that we're still in development today. Some of the things that were hard to do, but some of the things we believe that can be applied today and in future warfare. And that was really the genesis of the book. And when Dick approached me on it, I was like, absolutely, we should do this together. Like you, Nadia, Dick's been a friend for several years, and his background of studying special operations forces and partnering on this paper together has been really beneficial for us as an enterprise. So, Dick, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, Nadia, I would say a couple of things. One is that the continuity with special operations forces and big data, data integration platforms, this is really something that's been going on for about 15 years. So, many are discovering these issues in the last few years, but SOF has been at it since about 2006. So that's an important thing to understand why SOCOM became the natural partner for Project Maven. So that's really, I think, important. And then second, there's a direct relationship with what Bryan is working on, because the Maven team and SOCOM are looking at how artificial intelligence can establish an AI-enabled mission command system for SOCOM and for all of the units that are part of SOCOM. And some, of course, are out forward and fighting. So these are just a few themes that we tried to bring out in the paper, and I think are important. And then, of course, I mean, the final thing I would say is General Clarke has said that he wants Special Operations Command to become the first AI-enabled major command. So these are all kind of linkages that we can discuss.
I'd actually like to come back to that point of, so I want to circle back a little bit just to explain to listeners who aren't familiar with the paper the fundamental problem set that you were looking at, which, as I understand it, was essentially how soldiers in the field, how Task Force 714 in the field had to manage enormous quantities of information at real time in order to achieve their objectives, which was to find, neutralize terrorists on the ground. And so ultimately it was the management of this information. And I read the report, and I've listened to some of your podcasts, and some of the figures that you cited are pretty, pretty amazing, from 20 raids a day to 300 a day, which the amount of information was just, grew exponentially, right? I think, Dick, you also had a point of where, you were doing from the balance between operations of the 80%, 20% balance. Dick, what was that? What was that statistic? But maybe just explain a little bit about that to the listeners, and then we'll go to whether or not where we are today in terms of General Clarke's vision. How far along are you in achieving that vision?
Yeah, I can summarize that pretty quickly. So Task Force 714 was given the job of getting inside Al-Qaeda's secret networks in Iraq, which were all virtual and linked together. And what they did was they increased their rate of operation from, it was 20 a month to 300 a month. Now, when they did that, one of the big things that they would do in a raid was carry out something called site exploitation. So they would bring back quite a large number of computers, cell phones, hard drives, paper, etc. And this was mounting up, and they didn't have any way of dealing with it. So they had to figure out a way to put all of this information a common database. Now, there's a way of doing that that conditions it and prepares it so that you can search within it. Once you could start to do that, you could find linkages to individuals and start to sort out networks and who are the key players in those networks, and then go after them. And this was a cycle that just kept repeating itself over and over again, and it was awesome. And what it did by the end of 2008 was it put Al-Qaeda in Iraq and squarely on its back. You know, Bill McRaven said, I had my foot squarely on their chest, and that's where we intended to keep it.
And Bryan, I see you nodding a little bit. So I imagine that your study of some of this period also has informed your thinking about decision-centric warfare. And can you explain the link a little bit and then the concept?
Sure. Yeah, so the work we done with DARPA at the very start of the development of the mosaic warfare concept, which is a form of decision-centric warfare, we focused on SOF as like the best exemplar of the application of this kind of warfare concept. And to explain what it is, we have kind of two major trends that are driving us in the direction of decision-centric warfare. So on the one hand, we have these competitive regimes in warfare. Bob Work calls these offset strategies. So the most recent offset was the one where the US developed precision strike, stealth, and communication networks to be able to overcome or offset the Soviets' numerical advantage during the Cold War. Now those capabilities are proliferating to other adversaries. The Chinese military, the Russian military, many militaries have precision-guided weapons and networks, and then many of them also have stealth. So now we're seeing that that regime is going to need to turn over to a new competitive regime. What's the basis for competition between the most sophisticated militaries? The technologies that empowered that last regime were kind of the cutting edge precision guidance systems, communication networks, and stealth technologies. Today, the technologies that we see as the cutting edge are AI and autonomous systems. So the question then is, well, what's the operational concept that takes advantage of those emerging technologies and applies them in warfare? And that is something that's going to be based on decision making, much more so than the other case would be an attrition-based concept. So decision-centric warfare is in opposition to attrition-centric warfare. The other way of looking at it is very similar to what Dr. Shultz and General Clarke just talked about, which is we're seeing on the part of our adversaries a move away from attrition-centric concepts for how they get what they want from their opponents, and a focus instead on affecting the decision-making of their adversaries. So gray zone warfare, new generation warfare, as Russians call it, the shift towards system destruction warfare, which is what the Chinese call it, are all examples of shifting to a form of warfare that focuses on decision-making as the central battleground for a future competition. So that's the other major trend. And both these trends, the technological trends from AI and autonomous systems, and the operational trends from what you're seeing on the part of our adversaries, are both driving towards a form of warfare that's centered on decision-making more so than attrition. And I would argue, and you could say if you're a student of warfare, that we're arguing that decision-centric warfare is a form of maneuver warfare. So it's a form of maneuver warfare where you're doing a lot more of this maneuvering in the information domain. And I think the example that the SOF community has shown us is a perfect encapsulation of that, because they are maneuvering in the information domain and then causing very precise and targeted effects based on that information-centric approach to warfare. Rather than attrition, they're not trying to kill every bad guy out there. They're focusing on the exact bad guys that are going to offer the most leverage in terms of decapitating and dismantling the network that they are part of. The Chinese would say that's the exact same approach they would take to warfare and system destruction warfare, and the Russians would say that's exactly what they would want to do in new generation warfare, although they're obviously targeting different things when they're doing the targeting. So we see lots of trends driving in this direction of a decision-centric form of warfare. So the question is, well, how can we best, what's the force design and command and control processes that we need to empower that? And I think Project Maven offers us an example of what at least the command and control part of it might look like in the future.
Thanks, Bryan. So General Clarke, would you like to comment a little bit and also maybe link that concept to some of the changes and innovations that you're making at SOCOM?
Yeah, great. And Bryan, thanks for that. There's some really important points as we look at the future of war. I take one, this decision-making, I'll talk about in two perspectives. First, on the ability with Project Maven and all the loads of data that Dick just talked about. When we were really beginning this in the 2004, 2007, the technology did not exist to be able to apply the artificial intelligence and machine learning against it. You could say that the Project Maven aspect of this, that we can now pull in those incredible, terabytes worth of data now based on technology, we have the means to do that. But I would tell you, until last few years, the efforts weren't necessarily applied. It was still humans that were having to make all these, they're having to sort through, watch video, read every report, look at what, the detainee information, every detainee report, and the ability, a human cannot sort through and sift through this in sufficient detail, nor quickly enough to get to the pertinent information. So I think that's an important part of what Bryan was talking about, is we've developed this, and what Project Maven has brought in to this with object detection, so that humans can do only those things that humans have to do, and try to get the machines to do all those other things to be able to help with that decision making. The second piece, Nadia, that Bryan just hit on, which I think has got to be emphasized, is the information operations aspect to this. Because today, as much of we're going to influence our adversaries and our competitors, it's going to be what they perceive and what's going to be in the mind. And a recent example I'd share with you on a trip to Afghanistan, when I was speaking with our Special Operations Force commander that was there, in the period in Afghanistan, I would even argue from 2001 to 2018, our commanders on the ground focused 70% of their time on the kinetic fight of actually putting a bomb on a target, and about 20% of their time in the information environment, and that's against the enemy, but that's also with the local population, with the regional population. This commander said, I now spend over 70% of my time in the information environment and delivering non-kinetic effects, because if we don't come out with our messages and we don't influence the space, we will lose. It will be in the mind of the Afghan, in this case that I'm talking about, in this test case of Afghanistan, if we don't influence the population, Al-Qaeda and ISIS will get their message out more quickly than we do, and we will lose. And the population will not be supportive of what we're doing. So it's a really important piece as we look at what Bryan was just talking about in the decision-making centric piece of this, is getting the information in operations first and foremost. So I'll pause there, Nadia.
I'll turn to Dick in a minute, but I think it's important, and maybe if you all agree, but we're using the word information in different ways, and I think it's important to clarify some of the differences. There's information as data, which is coming in from all different sources and all different levels, and information as data, and then there's information as ideas and narratives that are used to shape and influence. And I think overall the term is used in different ways, but it's the same term. So would you agree that so information operations essentially is about shaping narratives? It's the way the military uses it, to shape narratives through ideas and communicating with populations. But there's also the related but separate problem of dealing with this exponential amount of data that the force needs to understand and make decisions on in the field at the tactical, operational, and strategic level.
Yeah,
Dick?
Nadia, I think
Yeah.
you clarified it exceptionally well. And as I look at information, and I tag on the word operations,
Right.
that is actually delivering effects that are non-lethal. When I talk about information operation, I talk about data. I'm talking about a completely different. All of the information that comes in that that then you label, catalog, and can disseminate is to make decisions. Different thing.
Right.
Dick.
So Dick, and then
think,
I'd like to talk about how we're doing as a force in terms of making the changes we need to based on some of these problem sets.
Yeah. Well, I think that the data in the information space is enormous, and so I don't know how far you want to go with this, General Clarke, but SOCOM does have a new system where it's dealing with all that data and using artificial intelligence in what in the old days we would call for political warfare, which is what's taking place in Afghanistan. This is the information component that the task force is using is to counter the enemy's messages, and so this in the old days was called political or psychological warfare, and there is a new capability for this that special operations now has. Did I go too far?
Yeah. No, that's great. So let's switch a little bit to artificial intelligence, machine learning, these technologies that are partly, that underpin why we have so much new data, and how the force at SOCOM, how you're integrating those technologies, and how is it changing the way that you're doing business day to day. And then I'd like to also then talk a little bit more broadly about how is DoD as a whole doing in terms of your evaluations. So General Clarke, first, could you tell us a little bit about SOCOM's goals?
Yeah, Nadia, start off with what began as a Pathfinder project for SOCOM with Project Maven, and I think it's important, for those who are listening, that this came to us with DoD assistance with what we're calling Project Maven, and we really started in Afghanistan, a little bit in Africa, because it was real important work to solve real world problems at a point of need with something that was repeatable. Every single day, as Dick talked about historically, we're doing 300 raids a night, and at times it's not necessarily that on that high water mark today, but this ability to solve this problem of all of the information coming off the battlefield to be able to increase our targeting cycle and to be able to do it more efficiently without hundreds of people looking at all of the information, but instead tens of people looking at the same amount of information and applying artificial intelligence against this problem. And the reason we went to Afghanistan, because this was happening every night, and the information was something that we could test and study. And so I see in this case, I think to get to the, take this and go to the DoD piece is as I believe SOCOM can be a pathfinder for the Department of Defense, because we actually have this real world problem with repeatable, which is effectively increasing our ability to target. And whether it's target an individual or target a group, you could apply the same targeting and using artificial intelligence to help speed up the targeting process in a much broader Department of Defense capability and advantage for the future. So Nadia, I can talk more specifically if you want to, or turn it over to Dick or Bryan.
Well, it sounds like yeah, I mean, maybe Dick and Bryan can talk about this, how you get organizations to change, relatively quickly. It's really hard to do at the DoD level, but the nice example of the SOCOM example that we're talking about is that you showed that you could do that relatively quickly, working with the private sector, bringing in new information, new modes of integrating this information, and deploying it very quickly, tactically at the battlefield level. Now, can DoD do that at the next level? So organizationally, how would you characterize, Bryan, where things are going with DoD, and then Dick as well, because both of you are also looking at it from outsiders looking in?
Yeah, Nadia. So one thing I'm seeing is just recently a shift on the part of the services and agencies in DoD towards thinking of AI as being something they can really use in their toolkit for command and control broadly. So I think Maven has made some inroads in showing them how algorithmic warfare more broadly could be used to better enable them to translate intelligence data, raw data, into information that they can apply for decision making, and actually give them courses of action to consider as commanders that could allow a commander to both increase the number of decisions they make in a period of time, and also increase the scale, increase the number of things they can do simultaneously. So it's how fast you're making decisions, but it's also how many decisions are you able to enact in parallel to give an adversary more things to worry about. Because with this approach to warfare, it's really about, it's classic maneuver warfare where you're trying to create dilemmas for an enemy. So faster, more effective decisions on your part and more decisions simultaneously are going to give an enemy more dilemmas to be concerned about. So I'm seeing on DoD's part, the Navy has started to implement AI-based decision tools. The Air Force through ABMS is doing this. The Army has done some of this with Project Convergence. So in my discussions with senior leaders, it seems like that we're now seeing AI make some inroads into the command and control processes. And it's because of the same problem SOCOM had, which is they see an urgent need to be able to make faster, more effective decisions and give an adversary something to worry about, because they're finding in their wargaming that that's the only way U.S. forces can win against a country like a Russia or a China that has kind of a home team advantage built in. So I'll turn it over to Dick at that point.
What I've seen is that, I mean, I agree with Bryan that there are these initiatives that I would say are coming from the top. But I want to talk a little bit about the other partner in this relationship. We've talked about SOCOM, but I want to say something about the algorithmic warfare cross-functional team, because this is a small outfit in USDI, but it's a very exciting place to get engaged with. When before COVID hit, I used to go and sit in their skiff every Friday, starting in late September of 2019. They're kind of classic disruptors, and they found an excellent partner in SOCOM. But now they're going out. They're broadening out to the peer competitor fight. And they have some very interesting initiatives with the 82nd Airborne Division and the 18th Airborne what am I thinking about? The 18th Airborne. Help me.
Corps, Dick.
I'm sorry. I'm
18th Airborne Corps.
Corps. I'm sorry. So what's happening with the Corps and then with the division is that they've taken the SOCOM idea of being AI enabled, and the division wants to be the first AI enabled division in the Army, and the Corps the first Corps. Now the reason I'm making talking about this from below is that we can see how SOCOM did it, Now we'll see how the 18th Airborne Corps and the 82nd does it. And with this team in the Pentagon, the big issue I think that's coming down the road will be what happens to Maven in a year or so from now when it goes out of business, because it's not here forever. I hope that there's some way of keeping that team together. Maybe they go to one of the services, because they have been for a small group. They have punched, and let me ask this to General Clarke. They've punched way above their weight in this.
Yeah, I'm glad Dick talked about the Algorithmic Task Force. I would also give, and Dick knows this, big kudos in the Department of Defense to the Joint AI Center, the JAIC, because I would say without their partnering, we would not have moved in the direction that we have moved in the last 2 years. And Nadia, I think it's really important, because the people side of this, which I'd like to emphasize, is commanders have to set the tone and set the conditions to allow innovation and allow people to bubble up the great ideas. And they set that tone, just like, we started out with the historical with General McChrystal with 714, brought in the process that went from 20 raids a night to 300 raids, a month. And it's the same thing here, because if we do, commanders set those conditions, but it's the people, the first soft truth, humans being more important than hardware. It's the talented people that we have to help foster. And one of SOCOM's major lines in artificial intelligence and machine learning is actually creating an AI-ready workforce. Because if you don't have the human capital invested in this, and I can go in detail on the things we've been doing by bringing in interns and hiring a chief data officer and setting conditions in this space, then we'll go nowhere, because you've got to invest the human capital into this space. So Nadia, I'll pause there, but I think it's an important piece to pick on, is the human part to this and people.
Yeah, so I mean, what I'm hearing from both of you from this conversation partly is that there's this informal competition going on internally. Imagine that at DoD by different agencies, even within the Army, to compete about who can sort of adopt AI most effectively and most quickly. But in doing that you need the building blocks, right? So.
Yeah.
Well, you see, Nadia,
Nadia, I wouldn't. Sorry, Dick. In fact, the two Army units that Dick just talked about, both those individuals just have been long-term SOCOM people.
Yeah. No, I mean in a healthy way. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're taking what I would say more is it's not competitive. It's sharing best practices.
Right.
Because as we talk about artificial intelligence and its application to almost everything we could be doing in the future, inside the Department of Defense, inside our country, there's more than enough room for all of us to give way. And I think it's sharing those best practices. I think we may be competing for human capital of who are the best data scientists, who are the best coders. But the truth is, as I went out to industry and talk to senior leaders in this space, they said you can get many of the younger folks to understand the most important piece to this will be the mid to senior level management that understands the application of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and fosters that inside their organizations. That's what's going to make a difference. So I'll pause there.
Thanks, General Clarke. Dick, were you going to comment?
Well, I was just going to say that what General Clarke said, and that is that if you look at who's commanding the 82nd and who's commanding the 18th, they came out of the same shop. But at the DoD level and at the Pentagon level, the work of first the Algorithmic Warfare team and then the Jake and General Shanahan, that's all been really important. And there's a synergy between all those efforts that went down to SOCOM, now goes to the 18th and the 82nd. So it's a kind of network that's starting to develop of individuals who aren't talking about artificial intelligence in a theoretical way or an abstract way. They're looking at how does this help us in the fight, and so that to me is what has been a big driver in these efforts.
Bryan, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I think what you're seeing is that in industry, when you talk to people in industry who I mean, almost every industry uses artificial intelligence now. When you talk, right now in our current work, we're doing a lot of work with the telecommunication industry and a lot of work with the network development industry. They all use artificial intelligence aggressively and have been for almost a decade. So DoD is just now kind of embracing the idea that AI is a fundamental technology, just like any other information processing technology, that they will be employing, and they're going to have to get used to it. So you need the people who know how to manipulate the code to be able to incorporate an AI algorithm into their software. And then leaders, managers are going to have to think of these AI systems alongside the human natural intelligence that they're going to work with. So I'm going to have an AI-based system that's going to be doing my maintenance analysis and looking for indications that I have to go do a repair job on an upcoming takedown of a system. A human used to do that, but an AI system will do it in the future. So as a manager, you've got to think about, well, what's the best use of that AI, that artificial intelligence? And then what's the best use of the natural intelligence and the maintenance technician that used to do that job, but now can do something different? So for managers, it starts to become an issue of managing your artificial and natural intelligence alongside one another as we start to see more and more artificial intelligence systems get brought into DoD. And it's just a natural trend that industry has been living with, for the last decade. It's now DoD is just finally waking up to this.
Well, and Bryan, General Clarke can talk to the fact that they're way up on the maintenance issue at SOCOM, and sir, maybe just talk a little bit about some of those other AI initiatives beyond Maven.
And within that, General Clarke, as part of this, do you think it's useful to very loosely divide the use of AI and how the generating force uses it? So to your point, logistics and maintenance, and how the operating force uses it. And is that a useful kind of loose distinction? And
yeah, Nadia, I guess I don't know if it needs to be a distinction, because I think it's going to cross everything we're doing. It shouldn't be an either or. And
right.
truthfully, I'd like all of our senior leaders to be thinking about it, across the spectrum. I would highlight that we have been using artificial intelligence in the logistics and in particular in the maintenance piece for over 2 years now. And not only did we find, what was great to find, not only did we find it saved us money, in terms of predicting that this engine life, which would have taken tens of millions of dollars of an aircraft engine that we would have pulled off the line, to find out it's actually got many more years of use. So not only do we save money, but we've actually saved lots of time and be able to actually increase our force generation, to your point, that those helicopters were actually able to be employed for much longer than we thought. But then there's as we're starting to uncover, there's so many other uses in this for the health of our force, that we can actually be predictive in healthcare, in brain and healthcare for some of our treatment, for our operators to get them back into the fight more quickly. We've actually developed some credas with some lead companies to help us look at where we could go for our brain health for our warriors who have been blown up, concussive injuries, many hard parachute landing falls. And we're finding that through artificial intelligence, we can actually maybe be more predictive in treatments than we ever could before. So we see this on that side, but then we can have, obviously, as we talked about Project Maven, see it in target detection and analysis, and truthfully, even in the information operations warfare part of this, where in that space, you want to be able to detect what an enemy is sending and receiving, what are false narratives, what are being sent across as bots from others, and the detection of those allow decision makers to make faster decisions. So you can play this across the spectrum, Nadia.
Thanks, General Clarke. Dick or Bryan, would you like to make any comments?
I just have one, and as you were talking, I just thought about the UAVs, and when I first started studying this, I ran into this term, the unblinking eye. So the unblinking eye is this UAV that can put a camera on you, Nadia, and watch you 24 hours a day. But someone had to be watching that video. Now we have AI watching that video, and it can tell us when you do something that we are concerned with. And all the other stuff you do, well, the AI doesn't have to alert us. But when you get up and go to your car, then it alerts us. So this is just a simple way of thinking about how artificial intelligence has. Now imagine being able to keep an eye on a huge part of the South China Sea that way.
Interesting. So yeah, Bryan.
Yeah, so it shows how there isn't really a separate information operations world where it's propaganda and disinformation and social media, and then you've got military data that's targeting data on specific military systems. They're all merged together in the information sources that are being employed by these algorithms, because they allow you to better characterize a particular target. So if you look at a peer competitor, like let's say the South China Sea, there's a lot of maritime militia ships out there that could look like fishing ships. It's unclear what they're doing. There's Coast Guard, there's actual Navy ships, and there's civilian ships that it's unclear what their purpose is. And so you have to watch the pattern of life and get an understanding of what is their job on any particular day. Because if a fight were to break out, one, you may not have enough weapons to be able to engage all the potential targets. So you need to know the right ones to hit at the right time, which gets the decision-centric nature of it, which is very similar to the soft problem. But then also, what if you are not in World War III, but you have a gray zone altercation occurring? What's the best way to diffuse that with the lowest level of escalation possible? Well, the best way to do that would be to identify what are the players that are the most impactful in this confrontation, and can I disable them somehow? Well, I need enough information to support that decision and the tactics I would develop for it. So I need to know, what's the person on that boat? Do they have, where did they come out of? What port did they come out of? Where do they live? Where are their families? What is the nature of their operations day to day? Those are all pieces of information that a commander can use to decide what's the best effect I can use to cause that guy to stop doing whatever he's doing in the South China Sea, and do it in a way that's proportional, as opposed to hitting them with a a cruise missile as my only answer that I would have at my disposal. So this idea of harnessing information from all these sources to come up with a targeting solution that allows me to either be effective in a contested environment or to deliver an effect that's very proportional is really powerful.
Thanks, Bryan. So in terms of, as we start to wrap, there are a couple of issues I'd like to get to. In terms of your understanding of the urgency of the situation, in which clearly I think it's urgent, it's pretty important that we continue at the pace that we're going in integrating these technologies, and knowing also how bureaucracies work. Do you think that we are going to see a really significant differences in the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? What's your sense of how quickly things are moving? Just your gut reaction on where things are moving. Bryan, do you quickly want to answer that? I'll just go around.
Sure. I think we're going to see an acceleration of this. I mean, I think that we're seeing a lot of work in the force generation world in terms of applications of AI, but I'm now seeing, like I said, the increased use of it for command and control. And there's a lot of programs out there that are doing this. And I think as commanders see the benefit in it, they're gonna ask for more. And there's going to be an intense effort to harness what Maven's done with the Algorithmic Warfare cross-functional team and try to replicate that in the services. So I envision that that's probably what's going to happen in 5 years.
Okay, so you're pretty optimistic. General Clarke?
Nadia, I can tell you, SOCOM's going to keep pushing. Okay, so I can speak to us, and it's a priority for us. We're going to keep putting our money where our mouth is because we got to get the people right. We got to get the data sets right. And we don't have a choice. We don't have a choice in this space, because if we don't, we'll get behind our adversaries. So, but I would put that my belief is that the services, Bryan already mentioned, Project Convergence, that the Army is leading. We participated with them in a big exercise this spring. We're going to be all in on their next year's exercise and in artificial intelligence, machine learning, the JAD-C2, the Joint All-Domain Command and Control, which really is about artificial intelligence, mission-enabled mission command. We're going to be in with that as the joint force is looking at the future joint warfighting concept. We have to be, we will be part of that, and we have to keep pushing. And SOCOM is going to continue to be a pathfinder on taking unique, repeatable, actual real world problems that we're fighting today and make sure we can apply them into the future.
And Dick, optimist?
Well, I think I'm optimistic, and I think that we have to look at this as I think of it as the new arms race, and I think that's how our adversaries look at it. It's certainly what Putin said. Putin said whoever wins the AI race is going to be the dominant player. So I don't think we have a choice in the matter. And I think we're just fortunate that we have leaders like General Clarke, and we have SOCOM, which is showing us the way forward. And so we have to follow that. But we can prevail because we do have the best tech part of the world. Silicon Valley and other places. We just need to be able to harness it for this new arms race.
Well, before we wrap, I would like to ask one question, just stepping back for a moment. What is the relationship between technology and our forward presence around the world? In other words, can we do everything that SOCOM does from afar? I mean, we're having this debate as a national level. I don't want to draw you into that, but a sense of the relationship between soldiers on the ground and the use of this technology. Dick, you wrote one of your books on irregular warfare and intelligence, and so maybe Dick, could you give us a comment on how you see that relationship evolving today? and then we'll really have kind of our last wrap up.
Yeah, well, I think you have to be forward. And now what AI and machine learning and so on, what that's going to do is you're going to be able to empower those forces forward in ways that they never could have been empowered before. But you do have to be forward, and so alliances and friendships and partnerships in the Pacific region, in NATO Europe, in the Gulf. I mean, all of these places are important, and so I don't think you can do that from CONUS.
Okay. General Clarke.
Nadia, I'm with Dick that you do have to have some presence. It doesn't have to be significantly large, a small special operations team, but most importantly, partnered with a local security partner that understands the terrain, understands the culture, can in fact make a tremendous impact in a region. And I think that those teams that what we're looking at is what we call the hyper-enabled operator, so that he has all the tools that he or she needs forward, so they can reach back and quickly get everything they need to be able to make decisions. And I think making sure that they have all those tools that they're existing, and then have all the necessary things to accomplish their mission. And that includes things like CASEVAC and MEDEVAC, and the ability to strike and protect themselves. They can make a significant impact. We don't have to have a large force, but I do believe we do have to have some credible forces forward.
Thanks. Bryan, any comments on that topic?
So one thing we're finding in our work with DARPA and the Marine Corps is that these AI-enabled decision support tools can really enable a forward force that's very small to be more effective and to be more survivable, and including their ability to get evacuated when they need to and get the logistics they need. So yeah, we're definitely seeing the synergy where AI is going to help provide that ability for smaller footprint forward forces to be effective.
Well, thank you, everyone. I'll open it up for any last thoughts that maybe you didn't have a chance to tell the audience that you'd like to. But otherwise, I'm so grateful. I learned a lot from the conversation today. Hopefully members of the audience did too. And I hope everyone stays well and healthy and has a wonderful holiday season.
Thank you, Nadia.
Hey, Nadia, thanks. I'll say two things to end. To your point on whether or not what's the progress we're going to see, I think we got to continue as senior leaders and as academics and policy folks to ensure that this receives emphasis. We're going to have to make sure that we're updating infrastructure, the policies that are required to allow this. Either get in place or stay in place, that we have that, and that will apply to data, that will apply to make sure we have cloud, multiple clouds, and the ability to search open source data, along with secret and top secret in a cross domain type of solution. That will be a key enabler, along with cloud compute at the edge, as we were just talking about, to make this happen. But at the end of the day, it's about the people and having the right people that are enabled and are given the leadership that at the end, humans way more important than hardware will succeed. Thanks.
Nadia, I would just say, and agree with General Clarke, it's about the people, and we are introducing and embedding this all of what we talked about here today into how we're preparing young professionals at the Fletcher School for this new environment. I mean, it is part of our curriculum. It's part of the way we bring speakers into the school. So we believe it's about people too, and it's about those that we're going to send forward from Boston.
Was that a plug for Fletcher, Dick?
Always.
Always. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you everyone for a great afternoon, and I appreciate it, and have a great week.